Okay, Conservatives of Texas, we are going to continue our visit with Mr. Jesse Frimmer. We're going to do a video on the Aspen Institute and also the Zinn Education Project. One is being welcomed at our college level, this one being the Aspen Institute, and the other is being welcomed into our high school. I would guess middle school as well, and elementary school for sure. That being the Zinn Education Project. So Zach over here has done some research on the Aspen Institute.
Really?
I've looked at a few things. I was thankful that we had Jason Fogelsong do some his research on it as well. We've been talking about this since probably, man, it's 23, maybe 21 ourselves.
20. Yeah, 20.
And the way it was introduced to me was through Zach. Just came across the alley there where we live in the neighborhood, and he said, "Hey, what?" No, that was the Zinn. That was the Zinn. We'll get into that in just a second. But the Aspen,
I think is when we talked about Aspen.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that one even goes back to 21 also.
It may go back to 21.
But nonetheless, the Aspen Institute, you can find them on aspeninstitute.org. Go to their search bar, type in Christian nationalism, and just watch the video. It doesn't start getting aggressive. I'm going to say passive aggressive because these folks are very nice and they're very semantical. They're very polite. They start off by speaking about pluralism and other niceties. But then after about the 11th minute, they go right in and speak about if you pray to Jesus, you're the problem, and Christian nationalism being tied to white supremacy. As a Christian, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not Caucasian. I'm Hispanic, and I am a Christian. And I believe that in the near future, they'll just drop off the nationalism part and just stay focused on Christian aspect. Right now, they're just kind of turning the water up underneath the saucepan, getting it to a nice little warm and cozy feeling, but I think it's going to start boiling before too long. Zach, what's your history with Aspen Institute?
Well, I know back in 2020, Amarillo College came out with their 2025 No Excuses campaign, and a part of that was that they're going to be a anti-racist institution, and it's based off of the research of Ibram X. Kendi. I've read the book, How to Be Anti-Racist, and the whole thing is chock full of contradictions. His thought process is all over the place, and there's a lot of lies in there about Trump, things that have been debunked, and that's just the anti-racist element. There's also the Christian nationalist propaganda that they're putting out, that if you're a patriotic, God-fearing American that loves your country and wants to have secure borders, then you are a bigot, you're full of hate, and you are the problem. It's a lot of globalist agendas that they're very in line with the World Economic Forum. And yeah, that's about the gist of it. I did read a report. It was from I forget what the name of the report was, but it was about the division between Christians and Muslims. And it was about 13 pages. And they start out like they're playing the middle of the road. We just want to see all sides of the issue, but then they point out all the bad things about the Christians, about the bad things that they do as far as discrimination against Muslims, and all the things that the Christians need to do to change how they view the Muslims. They don't say anything bad that the Muslims have ever done or any problems with any radicalism on that side. Just basically they focus on the white Christian conservatives, making them out to be the villain, the scapegoat, and that they want to create a conversation, but they want to control the narrative in that conversation. That's what I get from it.
Well, there's a lot of, I would say, videos that employers are putting out now also that are really fixated on a lot of the same parameters that the Aspen Institute is putting out under, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are Kevlar words to sound, comforting and whatnot, but we all know that they have ties to the Marxist agenda. And I was talking to Zach about a week ago. I was down at the Amarillo Public Library, and I just made a comment about securing our border, and I was asked to pipe it, basically, to watch what I was saying, or I would be asked to leave. And I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
I almost want to go and check out a book and act like I'm doing a book report and see what they do on the border. But nonetheless, these organizations, these businesses, these public entities, they get into watching these videos that are being rolled out by their upper management or administrators at all levels.
Mm-hmm.
At all levels. It's basically just corporate communism, and no longer are they just falling in line with the employee handbook. It's all these videos that are being rolled out that you have to watch as an employee, and they're all circumferencing around this whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's something else. It's almost as if they know that they're going to be looked at on their ESG scores, that they have to fall in line. Have you heard of ESG scores?
I've heard that as a conversation. I haven't. No.
Yeah. Economic, what is it, Zach? Social governance?
It is environmental social governance.
Okay.
And that's what it came from, the World Economic Forum, these globalists, and they're pushing it through these world banks and these corporations. You can find it in a bunch of the banks that we have here in Amarillo, some of the corporations that we have here in Amarillo. And this is why, as far as the city council goes, this is why it's important to support small business, because without small business, we don't have a country or financial freedom, financial independence. If we're having to rely on these corporations, then we no longer have financial freedom. That's why small businesses are so important.
It seems like it's all about leveraging. And if they can take you out, it's kind of like the Walmart, I guess, blueprint. When they first came into cities, they offered, they proposed that we're going to hire 100 people or 200 people. They come in, all the mom and pops have to close down, and then 7 years later, there's nothing but kiosks in the Walmart. And so that promise quietly faded away. And so it's they introduce these things to these big corporations and make these promises, but once there's no mom and pops, it's going to go back to zero, and they're going to have all the leverage again. Some words that businesses are using are things like tokens, that type of language. They're making that vernacular kind of commonplace, so where whenever you do hear it from your banking system or credit unions, perhaps it's been normalized, but tokens, really? Are you kidding me? I mean, who talks like that? That's, for some reason, that's the World Economic Forum's language, and without these tokens, you can't do certain things. There's things like bicycle lanes that they're implementing to keep you within a certain circumference of your neighborhood, of your community. It's all about global warming. I mean, this whole thing is just everywhere. What can you speak on some of this stuff?
Well, I'm a biker. I like bicycles.
Yeah.
So I don't get captured by I go across town on my bicycle. Back when I was younger, back when I was 78, I rode my bicycle to the VA hospital over on the north part of Amarillo. But going with the Aspen, listening to the Aspen concerns, I watched this video that Alex mentioned, and I saw their validations for being a Christian nationalist or eventually a Christian terrorist or one who was white supremacy advocacy. And their arguments were all based on what happened, based on the videos they witnessed at January 6, 2020 assembly of citizens who disagreed with a voting process done in 5 states in our election during November 2019. And I sat there and watched their arguments, but I saw what people did. And we had people from Amarillo that went up there, and I just saw people standing around praying. They were going up there praying. And well, that's what these people from the Aspen Institute were arguing. They had a bunch of these Christians out there praying at this insurrection. Well, it was not an insurrection. It was the free execution of the assembly to address an era of government in the direction of the Constitution of the United States. That's what those people were there for in Washington, D.C. The ones in Portland and the ones in Seattle were out there actually destroying property. Private property, plus injuring federal agents, marshals at these different, but nothing was done to those people. And they were told by our media that they were peacefully protesting with the fire going on behind them, the journalists with the fire going on behind them, a building, and it was a peaceful protest. There were no fires going on the January 6th trying to represent to our senators that there were citizens that did not like the way 5 states ignored the rules of the Constitution of the United States. The 5 states did not follow the legislative rules of their particular governments. They implemented COVID rules to say we're going to have ballot boxes sitting out on the curb and not have them on total surveillance at all times, like according to the legislative rules of those states. That was against the Constitution of the United States. They can't do that if they swear an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States. All of our local governments, all of our agents in government have to swear an allegiance to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States and follow its directives. That's why it seems so funny, because then I listened to Jim Jordan, congressman out of Ohio, and interviewing 2 correspondents, Democrat correspondents, that were affected by the FBI coming into their Twitter accounts and telling them what they could report and what they couldn't report. And they felt that objectionable. So when Mr. Jordan is interviewing these guys, he makes a 5-minute presentation about who was influenced these people in the DOJ to come in and tell these correspondents what they could say and couldn't say on these Twitter accounts. He said the Aspen Institute was one of the representatives, which was a communist-run organization. Now, this came from Jim Jordan in March the 5th of 2023, interviewing 2 correspondents, talking about what is the character of the Aspen Institute. It is supported by the Communist Party. It's not just Marxism, it's just communism, which is Marxism. But when I hear these other arguments about AG, I don't know about AG, I'm stupid. But I've heard arguments against AG from Glenn Beck and from Tucker Carlson, but I haven't investigated, like listened to Zach. I mean, we need to listen to these kind of things. We need to get ourselves on top of these things, because we are allowing our local government to be allowing their communist directives of DEI to come in and define the character of our faculty. And the faculty is being asked to follow certain criteria to go into the classrooms to teach our 18, 19, 20-year-olds college students. We as citizens in Amarillo need to be sensitive to telling our board members, are you paying attention to what you are getting bought and paid for, which I call 30 pieces of silver? And that's a relationship to what happened to our Jesus Christ. So are we as citizens willing to let a company or country come in here and buy our allegiance out of a few dollars in presentations? They had a celebration here this last week, celebrating the Aspen Institute, and it's recognizing that Amarillo College is such a great institution. It won't be if it is going to be led by people who follow the rules of communism and making everybody suffer the same thing. I say everybody suffer the same thing, not enjoy, but suffer, because communism promotes we are all equally put under the same rules of suffering.
Do you guys find it interesting that the DEI blueprint and template is never utilized in the sports arena?
That's one of the biggest arguments against DEI. It's just the validation is that you do not use DEI in sporting events. You always take your best candidates. You don't look at skin color. You don't look at gender. You look at their qualifications.
Who's going to win?
Who's going to win and who's going to be the best performer. And it's all based on whether you can perform better than the other person.
Yeah. I would challenge you, Dr. Lowry Hart, or anyone that might be connected to communicating with him. Why don't you guys practice what you preach and implement this into your new athletic program? Let's implement DEI across the board for the entire spectrum of the community college. I don't think you will. And so therefore,
we would appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, put your money where your mouth is and let's do it across the board. Why is it just in one aspect? I mean, the entire school is the entire school. Why is the athletic arena going to be or going to not be subjected to the DEI philosophy?
No, it will be based on your skill and your and how well you perform against your fellow competitor, your fellow teammates. And the best athlete will go on the court or on the track or on the baseball diamond. Those will be your best athletes. It's not going to be based on skin color, gender. Well, I think gender will be a question because we're saying that the female cannot be competitive with the male. And we're having these conversations about having trans people being competitive in women's sports. And we're saying that's not honest, that a trans male should not be competitive with the female because there are definitely XY chromosome differences between our genders. And that we need to recognize those biological realities.
Why is it that our educators can't recognize that and they're the professors?
They're the professors. And that's why you would think the president who has a doctorate degree would be an advocate of the best performer in the classroom is the one that's going to get the A.
Yeah. And I think his degree's in gender studies. I think I've heard that. So you would think he would know.
I'm just hearing that certain faculty members are going to have to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in their curriculum. And the spectrum that goes to is put the faculty member under a microscope as to, are you accepting certain people on certain kind of qualifications of gender, race, social background in your qualification of that student? And I've heard some professors that have rejected that responsibility and no longer on the campus.
I did see a report about 3 weeks ago that Asians now are not going to be considered under the same venue of I guess acceptance when it comes to certain measures that Black and brown are looked at, that Asians now, since they're topping the charts in their test scores, that they're no longer going to be able to participate in certain types of avenues of scholarships and benefits. I think that's racist. That's racist
because they look
at one class of people,
right?
And because they're scoring through the charts, going
They're setting the standard so high they don't.
Yeah,
they don't.
that they're removing them. And
Yeah.
to me, that's not diverse. That's not equitable. And that's
No,
not
no.
inclusion.
If that's what's going on, but my concern is it's the selection of your faculty to accommodate these ideals, and the point that the faculty ends up not teaching their subject matter, but being held accountable to some kind of sociological conversation in the classroom that's trying to teach English or math or accounting or what other kinds of curriculums that are at the campus.
Well, Zach, in your trade, and I won't mention, I'll let you if you want to, but if you start.
Well, I was like a male stripper at one point. No,
Whoa.
Well, if you start
up until 2 months ago.
2 months
yeah,
ago,
that's right.
you started eating cookies over Irene's house.
Yeah.
If you were to put someone behind a rig based on just equity and inclusion and diversity, I mean, what does that do to the safety measures? I mean, if you just base it on that and not actually qualifying to do the job, what does that do?
Well, it's going to create a generation of incompetent people that we're going to end up with collapsed bridges and medical malpractice because we're hiring based on skin color instead of qualifications. We had a bill passed back in 1964, the Civil Rights Act, that covers this. What are we doing? We're beating a dead horse. And it's hard to explain. I understand. I do agree that there is discrimination. I'm not going to say that there's not discrimination, but I'm saying we're not living in the 1950s anymore. We have interracial couples. We have interracial breeds. Well, I mean, interracial marriages have gone up 150% since just the past 15 years. We're not living in the 1950s anymore. We can have diversity, equity, inclusion. You want equal outcomes, but what about equal effort? Are we putting in that equal effort to be at that level of success as other people? Or are we just bringing the successful people down with the ones that are lagging?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ray Bingham back in 1860, the late 1860s, he endorsed and sponsored the 14th Amendment. And he said, how can we have a Bill of Rights that say, what we wanted to escape tyranny, and we're not doing anything for the newly freed slaves?
Mm-hmm.
And the 14th Amendment, as you guys know, it protects, folks, and it gives them a constitutional right to be afforded life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
The one that people don't ever mention in the 14th Amendment is property ownership. And the reason they never mention that is because folks would ask the next question. They couldn't own property.
Uh-huh.
Well, the reason they leave that out is because that 14th Amendment was designed and structured for the newly freed slaves. Okay, so all this diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's BS, because way back when in the late 1860s, we were already implementing a righteous behavior to recognize African Americans to the degree that there was an amendment added to the Constitution of the United States of America. And these Marxist just dividers, they just want to divide folks constantly to keep us fighting and going at each other's throats. There is nothing more racist than you telling me, a Hispanic, that I need special privileges in order to meet a test score because I'm not smart enough. I don't see why people don't recognize how disgusting.
How that's disgusting to put down.
That's horrific to do that. How are you guys missing that is the racism by these left-wing liberal folks that are acting like they're your buddies and they're your friends. No, they're saying to everybody, hey, let's give them a chance, man. They can't make it. They're not smart enough. How dare
Smart
you?
enough to do it.
How dare you?
You know, and we talk about discrimination and disparities and injustices and all this. Why do we have a border problem? You know, we talk about white colonialism or the Western civilization going around oppressing other civilizations around the world. Why do we have a border problem? If we didn't have Britain, France, the United States going around to different parts of the world trying to free them from enslaving themselves, which was a lot of what the Asians and the Africans were doing. They were enslaving their own people. If you didn't have Britain, France, the United States going to these different parts of the world, we'd have an even bigger border problem than we do already. The reason why we have a border problem is because we are the most prosperous, greatest nation, in my opinion, that's ever existed, and they want to come here. They want to be free. They want to be where there is a constitutional republic.
You know, there was one thing you also mentioned here about the amendments to the Constitution, and so many people fail to remember that the Republican Party of Texas was started by the dark brown skinned population. It was not started by the white population. I am white, they say. I'm from Europe. I'm white. I'm not from the African continent. My heritage is that. But it was the white Republicans that voted for the amendment to the Constitution that there would not be a skin color definition in our government. And that government was established under what is called Republican government. And it was the black, we call them black, the dark brown population, Afro-American, we want to call them Afro-American, but we have certain actors in our nation that don't want to be called Afro-American because they're not from Africa. They're American citizens. They want to be American citizens. They don't want to be called Afro-American, even though they have dark brown skin. But it comes back to who was lynched. The people that were being lynched were political people. They were representing Republican value systems. They were getting elected in southern states as Republicans, and they were being lynched.
Yeah,
they were destroying
those were the white folks too, right?
It was the white Democrats that were out going after the black Republicans, the Afro-American Republicans, the dark brown. They were being lynched along with the Afro-American dark brown. The light brown whites that were supporting the dark browns were also Republicans, and they were also being lynched. There were white-skinned people, as we call them white-skinned people, were being lynched for the value system that segregation is dishonest. And Woodrow Wilson resegregated our national government. Up until Woodrow Wilson, which is a Democrat progressive, we had an integrated government. Up until 1917, we had an integrated government until Woodrow Wilson got elected, and he took all the dark brown skinned people out of the national government. They were all Republicans. Now, people that defend the Democrat theology keep defending KKK. Robert Byrd was a grand poobah of the KKK of West Virginia, and he was heralded when he was 93 years of age by Hillary Clinton. And he was a great supporter of the KKK in his early history as
Barack Obama.
And Barack, well, I don't know about Barack, but
He did too.
Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton.
But yeah, Barack Obama, yeah, and Barack Obama's he's not a dark brown skinned person. He's a mulatto person because he had a white mother. So he runs around saying he's a black man, and you guys call yourselves black people that have a different shade of brown. I don't understand the logic that we allow ourselves to be dishonest about the true history of our country. And that is, there have been white people that died on the battlefield in the Civil War to make it possible that we have a united country under one symbol, and that is Americanism. We are all Americans. We're here as a melting pot. In the 50s, we called it a melting pot of different societies, different cultures. We had a lot of disparity between the Italians and the Irish, and a lot of mafia organizations running through the East Coast, but they were all Irish and Italian. But we still claimed that we were American. We didn't run around calling ourselves Italian Americans and Irish Americans. They called themselves just Americans that had Irish background or Italian. But now we got this Afro-American. I like what I wish I could think of that actor's name. He's a famous actor, and he's very appalled that they tried to make him use the word Afro-American to define who he is. He says, "I'm an American. I'm not an Afro-American. I'm not from Africa. I have never been to Africa. My skin is dark brown, but I have been treated."
Morgan Freeman?
Morgan Freeman. You all know Morgan Freeman. Listen to that guy. That's a man of honest character. I don't know if he votes Democrat or Republican, but one thing he's honest about, he's not an Afro-American. He is an American citizen. I am an American, and I've had German history. Do you think I believe in Nazism because I'm a German? No, I don't believe in Nazism because that's socialism.
Yeah.
That's National Socialism. I don't believe in socialism. I believe in capitalism. I believe that the best way to win anything is through competition. Yeah. Competition makes you do better. That's the reason DEI is of no value. It's competition that makes us perform. When we compete against something, that makes us better.
Well, the very award given under the auspices of diversity, equity, and inclusion, all these colleges are competing against each other.
Yeah.
So that's the irony.
What do you not see the paradox here? It's so silly.
It is very difficult.
And so, speaking of the melting pot, we'll go into the Zinn education, and the Zinn education ties right in with the Aspen.
It does.
It really does. So it's going to really be an echo chamber here. But the Zinn education is focusing on, 8,500 teachers across the nation that they're aimed at taking these pledges. To basically, they're using semantics. They say the pledge to tell the truth, but it's actually a pledge to disobey any legislation. And these teachers are taking this pledge. We have two in the area. Aaron Phillips, y'all have heard me speak about him. He's the president of the AEA here, which is very concerning. Some people say, well, it's just a small percentage. Well, guess what? If it ever gains any footing, it's a problem. And the bigger problem is that the AISD is hiding this guy whenever he's exposed. That's a major issue. So, but speaking about the melting pot, I want to remind Jesse about the time we went to the Alamo Center there on the east side, and we happened to, we didn't plan on seeing each other there. You were there, I went, and it was a Democrat Party sponsored event, and I like to go check them out. I like to go see what they're talking about. And I seen Jesse in there, and I sat down, and they showed a PBS video under the title Something Lens. What was it? Something Lens that PBS does. Anyways, they were speaking about the formation of the Rainbow Coalition.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, it's a community center over there at Western Community Center.
And it was, I felt like I was
funny.
I felt like what's his name, that actor, Jim Carrey, when he hits the wall in the Truman Show and he looks around. I'm thinking to myself, are y'all not watching?
Are you not watching what we're watching?
Are you not watching the same thing that I'm watching here?
The Rainbow Coalition
what is going
in
on
Chicago.
Here? Yeah, so in the late 60s.
Going against the Democrat Daley mayor, a Democrat-run dictator of Chicago, and these different societies, low-class people of different color, all formulated their group to fight against that, and they call themselves the Rainbow Coalition.
And when he says low-class, he's not
categorizing
them as such from his position here. That's what they were there by Mayor Daley's policies.
Right.
They were put in this low class.
Right.
They didn't even have running water. They
Yeah.
didn't have food. And so the Rainbow Coalition was formulated by the Irish, the Puerto Ricans, the Mexicans,
Right.
the African Americans, and just all different types of races. And they came together, and they were kept together by the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers was the sinew, if you will, that keeps all the joint together. And they actually campaigned for a Republican. The Black Panthers, you can look in the history of this, the Black Panthers campaigned for a Republican candidate. He wins. 4 years later, the Democrat Party introduces identity politics, and Chicago has never been the same ever again. And it's an atrocity, So the Zinn Education Project teaches these ideas about, let's teach history, and it's all built on half truths. I'm always curious as to why they just begin around 1700 or 1619.
1619, yeah, they put that 1619.
Why don't y'all go back even further than that? Why don't you go back all the way to the
1492
to why the transatlantic slave trade was even occurring? That very continent was the one in business of human trafficking, called slavery.
It's called Africa.
Yeah, they were the ones
selling their countrymen to the Portuguese and the English.
And if you look at the history, less than 5% were brought to the United States. Less than 5%.
They were doing it within their internal to the
They were going all around to
because it was
Brazil and Paraguay, and
it was a tribal culture
Haiti.
Leader with the tribal chief in charge, and so you always went out and went to other tribes and collected their people off of them, just like the Indians did here in the States, is that they would go and get slaves and commit them to their particular. Cherokee would go get a Blackfoot, or Blackfoot would go get an Iroquois, and they'd bring them to their communities, and they'd turn them into slaves. That was just slavery was not a product of the white culture.
I think the white culture is the one that ended it.
This white culture is the one that admitted that it was a wrong way to handle the human being. It started out with the British, and then the American society fought a war over the issue along with states' rights.
The gentleman I brought up earlier, Ray Begum, he's a white man. He says that we need to amend the Constitution for newly freed slaves. He's a white guy. They don't tell you that, They don't tell you that part.
Well, you could almost attribute the founding of the United States to Islam, but not in the way that you think. Because the reason why Columbus came across the Atlantic Ocean is because people got tired of going through the Arab world to get to China for their goods. So they wanted to find a different route to China and India to bypass the Muslim world.
Because
because
would that have been the Ottoman Empire at the time?
Yeah, they call it the Ottoman Empire, but it's Islam. When we talk about the Crusades, they'll tell you it's the Ottomans, but they don't tell you who the Ottomans were. So the Indians were also, they had black slaves also. They had Indian slaves. Slavery is not unique to the white man or to Western civilization. Slavery's been around since the dawn of man. Humans just have a horrible track record of treating each other well.
It's really convenient by the liberal left to just keep out all that information, to keep focused on Christian nationalism or just Caucasians. It's mighty convenient. And history is kryptonite to the liberal left. Tell us a little bit. I know you guys know about the Barbary pirates and whatnot.
That was Islam. That was
Islam.
They tell you the Barbary pirates. They don't tell you that it was Islam.
No, that was exactly Islam. That was a tribal government that was implementing its rules against our Navy. And Jefferson said, we're not going to have that.
That's right.
So we're going to send our leathernecks over there, and we're going to straighten you out.
If you ever get an opportunity, guys, go check out the congressional record. Everything's documented as to how people voted. And you'll see time and time again who implemented
What?
things against African Americans, the black codes, the Jim Crow laws. It's always been the Democrat Party every single time. But even further than that, I don't even want to just say Democrat Party. It's always the same people that are saying the other side are the ones that are implementing things.
It's gaslighting.
Yeah, it's gaslighting. And if you go look at the congressional record, you'll see how these folks voted. Everyone on the left contributes Johnson as being the guy who pushed civil rights through because he was the president at the time and he signed it. Well, it never would have made his desk if it wouldn't have been for the Republican Party.
Because they voted, they voted 60. I think they voted 75% to 80% of the Republican Party voted for civil rights, and 40% of the Democrats voted for civil rights.
The only reason it made his desk was because of the Republican Party. But yet we're called the racist.
Republican was in the minority at that time also. So if it hadn't been for the minority vote of 80% voting, that would not have passed because only 43% of the Democrats voted for it.
You know, what fascinates me about Dr. Larry Hart, he'll always give a plug. Let the politicians do politics. If you go to the Aspen Institute site, it's all political. Mm-hmm. About 88% of it's politically based. What is he smoking? You know, you can go look up Albert Shankles. He was one of the founders of the Aspen Institute in 1949.
Goes that far back?
Yeah, he was very racist against African Americans. It's documented, and that's why you see the liberal left always wanting to say, in the name of we're such a scarred and stained nation, we have to eradicate these structures and these monuments. It's because they're covering the evidence. They're erasing it because they know it all
reflects back on
goes
them.
back on them.
On them. Goes back on them.
You listen, I have scars on my body. You know, they're reminders of, guess what? Maybe don't do that again. Yes, there's scars on this nation, but you know, guys, you can't eradicate them from your history because how are you ever going to learn from your mistakes? The problem I have with the liberal left is they're the ones that did all these things, you know, but they want to conveniently cancel it out and say, oh, it's disinformation. This video here that they're talking about is disinformation. Well, before too long, you're not going to be able to go look up the history because it's going to be eradicated. You better go get it now. Take all your photos that you can because it will be removed one day.
This is all the culture of education, and that's what we were looking for our Amarillo College and our schools to make certain that they do not get corrupted by theologies that are contradictory to the true history. And ignoring the true history of chemistry, physics, the sciences. We have the science conversation about what's scientific and what's not scientific. We have these conversations, and no one's willing to deal with the truth of the science, because when you bring up the truth of the science, some people end up lying about the science, but they have the microphone or the megaphone. And the people that don't have the microphone or the megaphone or the power, their voices aren't heard, and we're being subjected to that when we fail to vote. I'll go back to voting because our Aspen Institute is here, and our board is allowing the Aspen Institute to have its influence in what goes on at our college.
And that should bother you guys as voters on every level, because the Constitution says that we have no taxation without representation. So here we are voting for these regions, but yet they're going to receive big money from organizations like the Aspen Institute and toe the line for them. You're the guys that voted for these representatives. They're the ones that are supposed to be our voice, not this mega $1 million Aspen prize that's going to influence the school board president.
The school board president. Or to herald him as if he's really made a great accomplishment to the influx of income to our campuses. That's what happened to Jesus Christ. There was 30 pieces of silver that were used to encourage the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Do you want the crucifixion of Amarillo College to be under the subjection of $1 million or $1.5 million just to get the accolades that
Mhm.
$1.5 million can bring to offset the building of innovative outposts.
Mhm. At a forum we had, it wasn't our forum, it was at Amarillo College, and they were asked who they basically submit to. Y'all remember that question? I don't know. Did you go to that?
Mhm.
You remember that question? And when it comes to the regents, and the majority of them answered to the president, the school board president,
Mhm.
and only 2 answered correctly, and they said to the voters,
Yeah.
to the ones that voted.
Now,
Vote
where
for
was
us.
this that you heard?
This is at the forum with League of Women Voters.
Oh, I missed that one.
Mm-hmm.
I missed that forum.
Yeah, and it was.
See, that's the big problem that a lot of people don't recognize, that we're not supposed to be listening to the president. The president's supposed to be listening to the board members that we've elected to represent our value system, to tell him or the city manager or the superintendent of schools, those employees are under the subjection and observation of our representatives evaluating us, the voters, how we want those paid bureaucrats, and those are bureaucrats, those are government employees being bought and paid for by our tax dollars. And our representatives are supposed to be going in there and supervising those people that spend our tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't represent our value system, then, or we don't stand up. Now, that's some of our problems, is we don't go in there and stand up and support the board members that are representing our value system, because they can be out of step with the majority of the board members.
Zach, tell us a little bit about the Zinn Education Project and when you found some of that.
Yeah, tell me more about this.
That just kind of fell into my lap. I just had my ear to the ground, and just thousands of teachers all over the country signed a pledge saying that even if CRT or any kind of curriculum like that was outlawed in their state, that these teachers signed a pledge saying that we're still going to teach it. We're going to defy state law and go ahead and teach it anyway. And I found that a couple of teachers had signed that pledge here in our area. So we made a couple phone calls. That teacher got moved 2 weeks into the new school year. He had been there for 13 years. He got moved 2 weeks into the new school year. So he didn't get fired. He got moved. But we didn't manage to rattle the cage. So it was a step forward.
Can you define CRT?
Critical race theory?
Yeah. Who can define CRT?
Critical race theory. It's the idea that we're responsible for slavery. That slavery started in 1619. That our nation was founded on slavery, on the backs of African slaves, and basically our founding fathers were racist, and that was our original sin as a country. And between that and stealing the land from the Indians, we don't deserve to exist.
Who built the railroads in the United States?
Asians, I think.
The Asians.
Well, then why don't we have CRT for the Asians?
Because the Asians aren't the victims.
Oh, they're not classified as victims, are they?
The Asian, they were the victims, but the Asians today are the richest race in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Because
don't you find it curious?
Because it doesn't fit the Asian people don't fit the narrative of the race baiters in this country that want to divide us.
Yeah, and the Asian isn't out there dividing us yet.
Well, and I'll add this.
Yeah.
The Asians are very successful, but so were the African Americans before the 50s.
Before the 50s.
I mean,
they were very successful. We had the successful ones here in Amarillo.
Until the liberal left managed to hijack the emotions of folks, they were doing very well. I mean, the very first female millionaire was a black lady. And that's all women. The very first millionaire
was a black
woman. That was a female, was a black lady. Yeah, and you had Martin Luther King, of course, but the one that no one ever talks about is Whitney Young. he was fighting for the same thing that Martin Luther King was fighting for, but in the boardrooms. He wanted the margins to be greater. He wanted to bless the generations of African Americans and other civilians that were considered not to have civil rights. Guess what happened to him? He drowned in like 2 feet of water. Go figure. So, guys, the liberal left is lying to black and brown folks, making us believe in this idea that for some odd reason we should stay in the place of victimhood. That's a lie. That's a lie, because if you go back and you look before the 50s, you had Booker T. Washington. I mean, these guys had schools. Frederick Douglass. You had all these schools that were just terrific.
What caused that change?
Did anybody ever read?
What caused that change to where we are now?
I believe it was the liberal left lying of these types of concepts.
Or was it the Greater Society?
Oh, yeah.
War on poverty, the welfare state that President Johnson enacted in the 60s that really did more
destroyed
harm.
the black culture.
Mm-hmm. More harm to the black community than
Penalizing you for having a father in the home.
Right. Yeah, make certain we don't pay you if you have a working spouse.
Mm-hmm.
That would not encourage you to have a working spouse, because we're going to make it dependent on the welfare system.
If we were so hyper racist in those time periods of that point in our history, how could you have institutions named after black folks? How does that happen? How would that even originate? You know, if I'm a vegetarian and I hate meat, give me a grill for Christmas, Jesse, please. Why? Why would institutions be named after African Americans if, in fact, this country was founded on such racial undertones? How could that even be possible? You mean they just looked the other way while these institutions were being built? No.
You know, Britain was the first nation to outlaw slavery, but
where were they putting their slaves, though? They weren't in Britain. Where were the slaves going?
Here.
They were coming to the continent of the United States. They were using the slaves to promote the economy for England. That's the only reason they got rid of slaves, because they were no longer connected with the continent of North America. They didn't have the need for slavery within the confines of Britain, other than India. And Indians were treated like slaves to the British Empire.
But no one ever asks, where were they getting these slaves from? They were coming from their own motherland.
They were coming from Africa. And who was giving them those African slaves? Other African tribes. African tribes were selling African brothers, they want to call them brothers, to Portuguese and English purchasers, or Spaniards. I think it was mostly Portuguese. And where did they send most of them? To South America. They didn't send them to North America. They sent them to South America.
Over 90%.
Send them to South America. They didn't send them to North America. Haiti was just totally was an African plantation. And Kamala Harris's grandfather, I think, owned a plantation of slaves.
So, yeah, Britain was the first to outlaw slavery, but it wasn't the first place to outlaw slavery. It was the state of Pennsylvania. And I believe that was either in the late 1600s or early 1700s.
Yeah, it was not
by the Quakers.
It's because of Quakers.
Speaking of Haiti, Jesse, you know, sugarcane was a high commodity back in those days, and they would work the Haitians. The French would work the Haitian slaves so hard, they would work them for 48 hours straight because of how you have to harvest sugarcane. And so Napoleon, he had to continue getting, I think it was something like 10,000 slaves to put them back to work, because a lot of them were dying. You know, and it was Toussaint Louverture, or Louverture Toussaint. He's called Black Napoleon because he rose up against the French army in guerrilla warfare and defeated probably the strongest military at that time.
At that time, the
And
French
it was
army
it was Haitian slaves that did that.
well, Napoleon.
And
Sacrificed
so
a lot
you
of his
can't tell
government
me that the African American race doesn't know how to face adversity and overcome. I mean, here you had the strongest military force in probably the history of our world in Napoleon, and they were defeated.
Partly
defeated.
because the French were not able to cope with the weather conditions there in Haiti.
And there was also what's the mosquito disease?
Mosquito and malaria.
Malaria, but they still rose up
They still rose up.
and they did it.
And that comes back to how did George Washington beat the British? It was not that the George Washington was just a tremendous tactical genius. He gives all of his successes to God and the providential hand of God. He accepted the fact that certain weather patterns seemed to always work to the advantage of the Continental Army, and it worked to the disadvantage of the British Army, which indicated that God wanted this continent to become a free example to the world as to how a culture can live free from the repression of other men. And that was called the Constitution. And now our government is ignoring the Constitution of the United States, even at our local levels. They're ignoring the Constitution and putting the power back in the citizens, not in the government. The government is the problem, as Ronald Reagan says. It's not the solution.
Well, guys, I would encourage everyone to research everything that we're talking about, everything that we're commenting on. Be our guest and do your research.
Amen.
Look into the Zinn Education Project. Look into the Aspen Institute. And if you're local here in Amarillo, Texas, Conservatives of Texas, we meet every third Thursday at 7 p.m. We don't just discuss things like this. We try to go get things done and taken care of. Please join us. Get involved and help us out with the cause of getting the truth out. And we don't go anywhere without Jesus Christ leading us.
Amen.
Amen.
And he is the truth, he is the way, and he is the life. And Hosea 4:6 speaks on, my people perish for lack of knowledge.
Right.
When you don't have the information, you perish.
Right.
And we also proclaim Isaiah 54:17 that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And, when we were at that Aspen Institute celebratory thing out there at Amarillo College, we put that in prayer.
Yeah.
And that's where the battle is at. That's where it's at.
Right.
It's not with flesh and bone. It is between principalities, dominions, and powers. And we know where the battle is at. And so I believe wholeheartedly, Zach, Jesse, that's why we were going to be very successful in this fight, because we're putting the word of God on everything. So if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to us on the comments or whatnot. I have my email, galbear@hotmail.com. You can reach out to me there. Come see us at one of our meetings. We'd love to meet you and have fellowship. You guys take it easy.
Where? Comanche?
Yes, it is at 2700 Southeast 34th, East Side entrance at Comanche Trail Church of Christ. All righty, and I do want to say that they have no affiliation with Conservatives of Texas. That's just where we meet. So do want to make that point. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a very good night.
Good night.
So we have that in our toolbox.